Also, just wanted to remind all participants we'll be recording it starting at 6 p.m. sharp. We have 2 minutes before we start the event.
Alina, quick question. We obviously can't have any clapping for people, right? That's not.
Yes, unfortunately, we cannot have, I mean, people can clap, but we just won't hear it because we are, but panelists.
We obviously can't have any clapping for people, right? That's not. That's an echo. Okay, we're fine.
All right, it's top of the hour. President Rogers, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Elena, and welcome all. I just want to say greetings to all who have joined today to honor Professor Angela Davis, and we have a unique opportunity to hear from her as well. And I know many of you had hoped to participate in this event in person, but due, of course, to the growing health concerns related to COVID-19, we thought it safest to host the entire event virtually, and perhaps another time we will be able to see each other. But in any case, we will create a strong community in a virtual setting tonight, California time, that is. Before we proceed, let us take the time to acknowledge Indigenous territory and honor the diversity of Indigenous peoples that are still connected to the land on which we reside. In particular, we would like to acknowledge, and I would like to on behalf of Fielding, that this particular session is presented and recorded from Santa Barbara, California, on the traditional land of the Chumash people, past and present. The Chumash people are comprised of the descendants of Indigenous peoples removed from their islands of origin, Limu, and Pakyak, Wima, and Tucson, who were subjugated by 5 missions during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast from Malibu to Morro Bay and inland to Bakersfield. We also acknowledge the ancestral lands of the Nashkotank and the lands of the Piscataway and the Pamunkey peoples in the Washington, D.C. area, where Fielding's offices are also located, and several of our speakers reside. Welcome. Our university has an obligation to remember. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people of other Indigenous communities. We also encourage you and welcome you to check in the chat box to let us know where you reside and the Indigenous lands you are joining from. Thank you. As I said at the beginning, tonight's event is a community one, and like many things, it's a collective effort. You will hear later from Simone Aquila and Crystal Farmer-Zigart, co-founders of Healing Justice Santa Barbara, and Dr. Marcos Vargas, Executive Director of the Fund for Santa Barbara. Colleagues in work together. We appreciate the opportunity to partner with these 2 Santa Barbara organizations to produce the event tonight. I also want to thank the Santa Barbara Independent for their generous premier sponsorship of this event. And we express our gratitude to our colleagues at Pacifica Graduate Institute and the Alumni Association there for their support. And just want to say, as a colleague, congratulations on launching the Alumni Network Association and celebrating your 10th anniversary of that association. We also appreciate the sponsorship of Santa Barbara City College Foundation, which has supported the college and its students and many community events since 1976. Thank you to Planned Parenthood Central Coast and the Winters Group. And I'm sure that the slide with the sponsors' logos will be up in just a moment. We appreciate also the support of our elected officials in promoting and attending this event. Thank you, Congressman Salud Carbajal, who is an alum of Fielding Graduate University, and also to Council Member Oscar Gutierrez and Council Member Kristen Sneddon. And also a shout out to Senator Monique Limon for helping spread the word about this event on social media. That's always welcome. Santa Barbara is a community that also has a long history of commitment to progressive education, and I think it's worth just mentioning this evening. That is progressive education in the context of education that improves people's lives and inspires many to make a positive difference in the world. For example, I think of Santa Barbara City College. It's often ranked #1 in the nation for its strength in increasing and advocating for access to higher education. Or think of Pacific Graduate Institute, which was founded by a Fielding graduate and has very creative Jungian psychology programs and mythology programs. And then, of course, many of us know UCSB, which has grown from a small school located in town to a large research university perched on the ocean. And then there's Fielding. We were founded by faculty 48 years ago to be a place where graduate education could be designed for people who had been shut out of traditional graduate education at that time, particularly women and people of color. And in the spirit of acknowledging those who dedicate their lives to education for social change and to fighting for justice, we honor Professor Angela Davis this evening. Scholar activist Angela Davis has made it her mission to share her life story and challenge her audiences to join the struggle for racial, economic, and gender justice. Professor Davis has championed for social justice and campaigned for her lifetime, particularly with the prison industrial complex that has grown since the 1980s with the emergence of the private prison industry. In her work, Professor Davis urges us to hone our critical skills, develop them, and implement them while fighting for racial, economic, and gender justice. So as we begin to turn our minds to the main event, I want to thank you, not just for being here, but also for supporting the mission of Fielding specifically, and more generally, for being part of a community of people that advocates for others so that they can live with dignity and respect. And on the eve of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King holiday, let us remember his words, that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And these are words for all of us to live by as we each do our parts. I would now like to introduce the director of the Marie Fielder Center for Democracy, Leadership, and Education at Fielding, and also the distinguished senior advisor to the president, Dr. Orlando Taylor. Dr. Taylor envisioned the Marie Fielder Center and the Medal for Social Transformation, both as ways to honor the legacy of Dr. Marie Fielder and acknowledge leaders who advocate for democracy, education, and racial justice. Dr. Taylor has been a longtime colleague of mine and has been a national leader for many years and decades on issues pertaining to diversity and inclusion in higher education, including service as chair of the board of the prestigious Council of Graduate Schools. He's been a particularly vigorous advocate and spokesperson on topics relating to access and equity in higher education, and on preparing the next generation of researchers, leaders, and faculty members for the nation's colleges and universities. Dr. Taylor is currently a co-principal investigator and director for a major National Science Foundation project that conducts research and also advances the leadership and development of a new generation of leaders in the STEM fields throughout the United States, including historically Black colleges and universities. And Fielding is proud to play a small part of this work. So Dr. Taylor, I now turn the microphone over to you. Thank you.
And thank you, President Rogers, and good evening, everyone. I first of all want to join President Rogers in welcoming each of you to the very first virtual ceremony to bestow upon a distinguished individual the annual Marie Fielder Medal for Social Transformation. And tonight's medal recipient, Professor Angela Davis, is most deserving of this high honor. The Marie Fielder Medal was first awarded in 2016 following the establishment of the Marie Fielder Center for Democracy, Leadership, and Education at Fielding. The medal and the center are named in honor of Dr. Marie Fielder, a truly amazing individual and a most distinguished member of Fielding's founding family in 1974 and chaired the university's first board of trustees. Dr. Marie Fielder was a national advocate and activist for inclusion of African Americans into every aspect of American life. Through her vision and commitment to justice throughout her lifetime and 60-year career, Dr. Fielder inspired many and left an indelible mark on the entire nation. In the 1960s and 1970s, for example, she contributed to the work of such civil rights leaders as Martin Luther King Jr., the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and Whitney Young of the National Urban League. The breadth of her work to achieve racial equity with numerous governmental and civil rights organizations was enormous. In this regard, she worked with the Black Panther Party and also served as an advisor on racial matters to the Los Angeles Police Department and multiple corporate organizations. Closer to home, Dr. Fielder was one of the most influential women in the history of California education. A PhD recipient from the University of Chicago, she was the first African-American woman with a doctorate to teach at a college or university in the San Francisco Bay Area, and one of the first researchers who documented cultural bias in IQ tests. She helped the Berkeley Public Schools become the first in the nation to desegregate through two-way busing, one of her proudest accomplishments, where white students in Berkeley were bused to predominantly Black schools in the city and vice versa. Marie Fielder Center for Democracy, Leadership, and Education was launched at Fielding in 2016 to provide a multidisciplinary and inter-school space for students, alumni, and faculty to engage in advocacy, education, and research to advance Fielding's commitment to seeking a just and inclusive society for our nation and indeed all of humankind. I want to take a moment to thank the Center's Advisory Council for their stewardship of the center and guidance in selecting recipients of the Marie Fielder Medal for Social Transformation. Now, the medal was initially awarded in 2016. The annual awarding of this medal is perhaps the center's annual signature initiative. It recognizes an individual for a lifetime of sustained advocacy, actions, and achievements devoted to supporting access, equity, diversity, and inclusion of all people and communities in their quest for success and fulfillment of their aspirations. Tonight marks the fifth awarding of the Marie Fielder Medal. Professor Angela Davis follows a distinguished group of previous awardees, including Dr. Walter Bumpus of the American Association of Community Colleges, Professor Gary Orfield of the UCLA Civil Rights Project, Professor Emerita Patricia Gurin of the University of Michigan, and most recently, Ms. Dolores Huerta, a co-founder with Cesar Chavez of the National Farm Workers Association, which later became the United Farm Workers. Professor Angela Davis has been deeply involved in some of the major social movements over the last 50 years. She was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, by parents who were active community organizers. As a teenager, she marched and picketed against racial segregation. She went on to earn a doctorate in philosophy and became known as a radical feminist and activist Today, she is a distinguished professor emerita at the University of California, Santa Cruz. She's one of the founders of Critical Resistance, a national grassroots organization fighting for change in the prison system. Her books include Are Prisons Obsolete? And Abolition Democracy, Beyond Prison, Torture, and Empire. In her work, Professor Davis urges us all to hone their skills, develop them, and implement them while fighting for racial, economic, and gender justice. It is with great honor that I bestow the 2022 Marie Fielder Medal for Social Transformation upon Professor Angela Davis. Professor Davis, would you like to say a few words before we proceed with the program?
Thank you so much, Dr. Taylor. First of all, let me thank President Katrina Rogers and you, Dr. Orlando Taylor, of the Marie Fielder Center for Democracy. And of course, I thank Fielding Graduate University and the other co-sponsors for sponsoring this event this evening. I want to express my deepest gratitude for this major honor you have bestowed on me, the Marie Fielder Medal for Social Transformation. This event, whose theme is How America Can Change, has inspired me to think deeply about the possibilities of transformation in our time. Given the fact that I have been convinced for the vast majority of my life that social change emanates from the activities and contributions and collective commitments of vast numbers of people who are not the great men who until relatively recently have been regarded as the makers of history. There is clearly no social transformation without the kind of education for which Marie Fielder was a proponent and the kind of pedagogy she represented in her own work as a teacher. And let me say that I'm especially honored to receive this medal since I joined such distinguished recipients as Dolores Huerta, with whom I have worked on many, many projects over the years. She is one of my major heroes. And let me also say, as you pointed out, Dr. Taylor, my mother, Sally B. Davis, was a teacher and an activist. And I followed her path, the path of Marie Fielder. So thank you so much for lifting her up and for allowing a multi-generational appreciation of her work. I can only hope that my own contributions are worthy of the honor of the Marie Fielder Medal for Social Transformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Davis. We really appreciate your service for decades. There is no higher calling than the work that you have inspired and that you modeled the way for us. And we just want to appreciate you so much. And I do wish we were all in person to gather around you. And we often honor people because it's part of honoring those now and for those who come after. And I know you've spent a lifetime working with students, and I know that that has also been a source of inspiration, I'm sure, for yourself as well as for others across the country over many decades. I now want to just introduce Miriam Dance. As we continue with the program, there'll be plenty of time to hear more from Professor Davis shortly. Miriam Dance is a performer, a singer and songwriter, and current director of theater at the Riviera Ridge School and Bishop Diego High School in Santa Barbara. Recent theater credits include gospel and rock and roll cabarets with Lamb Players Theater in San Diego, Fires in the Mirror, Dolores Van Cartier and Sister Act as well. Her original play, In His Hands, premiered in the UCSB New Works Lab, where she received her BA in theater directing and playwriting. Miriam released her first EP entitled Heartstrings to all digital music platforms. But in addition, as if that weren't enough, on June 2nd, 2020, Miriam was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer, stage 1B, and after treatments became the face of Breast Cancer Research Foundation in 2021 and was featured in national publications such as Vanity Fair, Elle, Bazaar, People, Shape, Allure, Vogue, and Better Homes and Gardens magazines. Miriam was also the featured performer in the Hot Pink Evening and shared the stage with Broadway greats. And Miriam, thank you for that kind of service as well, because that really also helps others who have similar challenges. So I now turn the floor over to you, Miriam. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you so much. This song will be accompanied by John and Nancy Douglas. And it is a song that was written the day after George Floyd's murder. And it is a song of pain, a song of sorrow, and a song that just asks the question, when will we matter? And it's also a song that is a call to action. It says, rise up, tribe up, because only together, when we are together, that's when change will happen. So when we sing the chorus, I want you to join in with us in any way that you can. So the words are just rise up, tribe up. And it goes like this. Rise up, tribe up, rise up, tribe up, rise up, tribe up, rise up. How many more brothers, countless names, how many more Black Death on display? How many more times will they just walk away? When will we matter? How many more children will see daddy in blood? How many more mothers have to bury their sons? How many more charges and no convictions? When will we matter? Oh, will you just let us be? Oh, respect our right to breathe. Oh, will you just let us live? Enough is enough. You will pay for your sins. Rise up, we ain't taking no more. Tribe up, no more blood on our floors. We gon' bust through the doors for sisters and brothers who can't speak no more. You gon' stop killing us. We are so furious. You won't get our trust. The system that's broken was never for us. How many more protests and justice signs? How many more cans of tear gas in our eyes? How many more screams of outrage and sorrowful cries? When will we matter? How many more Garners, Browns, Davis, Castilles? How many more Martins, Floyds, Grays, and Tills? How many more Black lives will they steal? like it don't even matter. Oh, will you just let us be? Oh, respect our right to breathe. Oh, will you just let us live? Enough is enough. You will pay for your sins. Rise up. We ain't taking no more. Drive up. No more blood on our floors. We gon' bust through the doors for sisters and brothers who can't speak no more. You gon' stop killing us. We are so furious. You won't get our trust. The system that's broken was never for us. We ain't taking no more. Drive up. No more blood on our floors. We gon' bust through the doors of sisters and brothers who can't speak no more. You gon' stop killing us. We are so furious. You won't get our trust. The system that's broken was never for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. No word. Thank you. It's beautiful. I now turn the floor over to Marcus Vargas. Thank you, Marcos.
Well, thank you, Miriam. Thank you so much for that beautiful, powerful, and inspiring song. It is truly a call to action. Also want to thank your accompanists, John and Nancy. Let's give this Miriam and her accompanists a virtual hand. Good evening. My name is Marcos Vargas. I'm the Executive Director of the Fund for Santa Barbara. For those of you unfamiliar with the fund, we are a progressive community foundation and regional intermediary based here in Santa Barbara County and serving the broader Central Coast region. Our mission is to advance progressive social change by strengthening movements for social, economic, environmental, political, and racial justice. This is a very special night, and I'm so honored to be facilitating tonight's community dialogue with our esteemed guest, Dr. Angela Davis. First of all, I want to again welcome you, Dr. Davis, to our community and express our deep gratitude, both for joining us tonight and most importantly, for your decades of social justice activism and leadership. It is truly a tremendous honor to have you with us as a guest tonight. This evening, I'm also honored to be sharing our virtual stage with two powerful feminist activist leaders and co-founders of the organization Healing Justice Santa Barbara, Crystal Farmer Seagart and Simone Rushkamp Aquila. Thank you both for your leadership and for being part of tonight's dialogue. Dr. Davis, collectively, we have come up with several questions for you tonight. And if time permits, we'll be able to address all of them, but we'll give it our best. So given our limited time, let's get right to it. Our first question will be presented by Simone, who will also begin with a few brief remarks regarding the work of Healing Justice. Simone.
Hi, everyone, and gratitude again, Professor Davis, to be able to join with you in this setting. I'm Simone Aquila, pronouns she, her, hers. For anyone who may need a visual description, I am a dark-skinned Black woman. Today I'm wearing a happy green head wrap. I'm one of the co-founders of Healing Justice Santa Barbara. Healing Justice Santa Barbara takes great pride in furthering the frameworks of healing justice as coined by Cara Page, by creating communities of care and never glamorizing burnout or celebrating moving past our bodies. As a collective of Black activist mothers, we are committed to disrupting the ongoing displacement of Black people in Santa Barbara by leveraging the landmark process to prevent gentrification, demanding the creation of a Black and African American cultural resource center while operating and running the Melanin Art Gallery, and revisioning safety in ways that center Black joy and ease. You can learn more about our work at hjsb.org. So our first question is really to our Black community, and I'll be honest, a question that Crystal and I were just hoping to uplift. And it's really speaking to, especially in Santa Barbara, where the Black population continues to be displaced, we were hoping to find strategies for sustainment. Black people in Santa Barbara have often led the way in creating structural systems and welfare programs that they are not able to benefit from in the long run due to displacement. For example, in Santa Barbara, the County Food Bank, the Eastside Community Center, and Goleta Valley Hospital were all created or co-founded by Black people whose descendants have now been erased and displaced. If we're to consider that many of these programs of community care lead to abolition and are necessary for abolition, how can we as activists respond to the ongoing intentional displacement of Black residents and organizers? Oh, Dr. Davis, I believe you're on mute. But I saw your face speaking, so I already know it's wonderful.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you.
I always have to remind myself, unmute first. I was saying, thank you so much for your work with Healing Justice, Santa Barbara. And we're very fortunate to be living at this particular moment in history, because more than ever before, I think we understand the interconnections between physical, spiritual healing and social justice. And I would like to thank you for the work that you have done in Santa Barbara. The question of how to guarantee the lifting up of those who have played an important role in establishing institutions that give us inspiration for the future, and particularly Black people, is one that I think can only be answered in the course of actual practice. There's some questions that don't really have theoretical answers, but we have to forge those answers in the process of trying to address the issue of erasure. And so this means that this is a challenge, not primarily for Black people, but for those who have benefited from the contributions of Black people to always remember and to recognize that history is an important dimension of the work that we do today. We always inhabit our histories, whether we acknowledge them or not. And as we know, one of the major components of systematic and structural racism has involved the erasure of the contributions of communities of color, not only Black communities, but Latinx communities, and certainly indigenous communities. And so this is a period when we are especially aware of the fact that we have to value each other and value each other's histories. And so I think that is in part the work that your organization is attempting to do in Santa Barbara. So let me urge you to continue the work and bring others along. One of the points I like to make is that even though we often refer to specific histories, specific racialized histories, Black history, the history of Latinx communities, of indigenous communities, those histories never unfold in isolation from one another. They're always interconnected and interrelated. I just finished a wonderful book by Kelly Lytle Hernandez, which is about the role that the Mexican Revolution played in developing an anti-racist and anti-capitalist consciousness on this side of the border. So I want to emphasize the fact that Black history needs to be valued by everyone, not only, of course, Black people, but not only Black people, because it is the history of a centuries-long quest for freedom.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Davis. Very insightful words. Our next question is actually my own. Dr. Davis, as many of us are aware, much of your writing and activist work since the 60s has focused on prison abolition and the dismantling of the prison industrial complex. I personally want to thank you for all your work in this important area. Here in the Central Coast, a growing number of us believe that we have the potential of building a regional movement to address a number of important criminal justice issues facing our communities. Here in the Central Coast region of Santa Barbara, Ventura, and San Luis Obispo counties, we have local community groups working on a range of campaigns, including the establishment of community police oversight commissions, the fight to stop jail expansion at the expense of funding for prevention and anti-recidivism programs, the removal of police from our school campuses, and the elimination of gang injunctions. Unfortunately, most of these efforts are being organized independently across our 3-county region and to a large degree in silos. My question to you is, do you think that the new abolition movement, with its vision to eliminate the prison system, can include criminal justice reform campaigns such as these as part of a unified effort to build a broad movement for prison abolition? And if you would, please share with us any thoughts you might have on how we might go about building such a movement here in our region.
Well, thank you for the question. And let me see if I can address it somewhat succinctly, because of course we could spend the rest of the time allotted for this program exploring how we might support these transformations. And let me say, first of all, that abolition, which used to be, not long ago, was considered to be a sort of marginal strategy. And I can tell you many stories about people who have asked me over the years, why do you embrace, such a utopian or such an impossible strategy? It's never going to be possible to abolish prisons. It's never going to be possible to get rid of police. But of course, as a consequence of this terrible pandemic, which just won't let up, and the increased awareness of structural racism in connection with the communities that are most deeply affected by the pandemic, we've become more intensely aware of the structural racism inherent in, for example, the healthcare system. And of course, for many years, many people have been talking about systemic racism and structural racism, but there's been this persistence in imagining racism as a defect of the individual. And I think finally, during this last period, we recognized that the danger of racism is that it is so deeply embedded in our social institutions, our educational institutions, our economic institutions, our healthcare institutions. And so if we want to imagine a better future, we certainly have to figure out how to recreate the social institutions that we need in order to live in society with one another. We will have to learn how to make them responsive to the needs of human beings. I've been involved in the prison abolitionist movement for quite a long time, since I myself was in jail, since I would say 1971, when I first heard the Attica brothers in their uprising call for an end to the repressive and racist prison system. And I think that that initially people were taken aback, because they assumed that it was primarily a question of getting rid of that institution, not a question of reorganizing society so that we would no longer be in need of such institutions of repression and violence. So I guess the first point I want to make is that abolition doesn't call for a focus on discrete institutions. The question is not how do we get rid of prisons? The question rather is how do we imagine a future in which we no longer need to rely on these institutions of violence and repression, on police and prisons. But of course, that's also related to healthcare. It's also related to education. It's related to all of the institutions in our society. So I would answer your question by saying, absolutely, we have to work together. And those of us who are attempting to represent an abolitionist approach should not assume that everyone immediately will embrace abolition. But at the same time, we raise the kinds of questions that encourage people to think deeply. And we ask, what have prisons ever done to address the social problems that they presume to address? And if we look closely, we discover a connection between the state violence that is incorporated in police and prisons and the community violence or the intimate violence. And so I would suggest that we also think about the feminist context of abolition. And we also recognize that there is a connection between the violence of prisons, the violence of police, the violence of the military, and the violence that happens within intimate relationships. And finally, as you see, I can go on and on in an attempt to address your question, but I would say abolition encourages a different kind of imagination. And so I would say even those people who embrace reform, and of course we need some reforms, but abolition argues that those reforms are not going to actually solve the problem, not going to address the problem in the way that it needs to be addressed. But at the same time, we encourage people to think deeply and to think imaginatively and to think creatively and to shift from the focus on discrete institutions to the question, what kind of society would we need if we do not want to continue to depend on these institutions of violence and repression that as a matter of fact, end up reproducing the very racist violence that we think we are challenging.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Davis, for that insight and that vision. Our next question is from Crystal.
Hi, Professor Davis, and hi, everyone watching. Crystal Farmer Seaguard, pronouns she, her. I am wearing a sweater, turtleneck sweater over my neck, and I'm a light-skinned Black woman. Post the abolishment of slavery, there was a great migration of Blacks from the South to the North. Do you think another great migration can be a part of the formula for improving the Black American experience? For example, migrating from dense cities to more rural communities. If so, do you foresee this would improve our voting power and socioeconomic outcomes?
Well, thank you for the question. And I suppose I would emphasize the fact that that mobility is characteristic of our populations today. And that, as a matter of fact, large numbers of Black people have engaged in a process of what you might call reverse migration from the North to the South, from the West to the Southeast. But I don't know whether that by itself will solve our problems. As we see, given this current political situation, there is an attempt by those who represent the backward political forces in this country to prevent Black people and other people of color from using the power of the vote. The redistricting that's happening, all over the country. So I think we have to think in more complex terms, and we have to recognize that the migration that is happening is also reflective of a kind of global migration, not only of Black people, but other people from the global South to the global North. And if we are going to move in a progressive direction for the world's population, I think it's necessary to, again, engage in a kind of exercise of the imagination. And I say that because we often assume that the nation state is the only possible way of organizing human populations on Earth. But precisely because of the migrations that are occurring, and of course here in our hemisphere, we see migrations from Central America, from the Caribbean, and we see the development of even more repressive police forces and carceral methods to prevent this migration from challenging the current the current meaning of borders. And of course, I'm not going to mention the name of the person who last occupied the office of the presidency, who referred to Mexicans and other people from the Americas, including the Caribbean, in such racist terms. We're still confronting possibilities of fascism. One of the important dimensions of the last presidential vote was that we did manage to evict fascism from the White House. But that was not the end of the struggle. And as we see now, there are efforts to guarantee that those who represent the backward forces of history, who represent white supremacy and racism, are attempting to prevent us from moving forward. And so we're talking about mass activism. And I think it's important to recognize that simply electing a president did not really change the situation in the ways many people assumed. But we also know that mass mobilization and mass organization can bring about change. We know that changes occurred as a consequence of people pouring out into the streets, protesting the police lynching of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others. So I want to suggest that we continue to think about the potential of building movements. That is what is going to provide a better future for us all.
Thank you once again, Dr. Davis. Simone, would you provide us the next question?
Yes, and I do have to say, as much as I would love to say that we came up with all of these questions on our own, as I mentioned before, these were actually questions brought forward by our Black community members and other people who are a part of Healing Justice Santa Barbara. So our gratitude for Tamara for that last question. And the question that I'm going to ask now was actually submitted by community member Flavia. And so she said, you visited Brazil in 2019 and urged the crowd to get to know the work of local Black feminist thinkers like Leila Gonzalez. Do you see any urgency in encouraging Black North America to look at Black Latin America for reference and vice versa? What do you think is the biggest benefit that we can learn? How might we grow out of such unity? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the question about Brazil. Yes, I did last visit Brazil in 2019, but I have visited Brazil many times. And I continue to revisit Brazil because, even though they're confronting a very difficult political situation now with Bolsonaro, one can feel the ways in which Black women and Indigenous people are rising up to take the reins of their destiny in their own hands, and especially Black women. And I mention this because it's often assumed that when you speak about Black feminism, for example, you're referring primarily to the US. And so, of course, we think about Patricia Hill Collins. We think about the recently deceased Bell Hooks, who, of course, made such an incredible contribution. We think of people like, Alice Walker, and we think of Beverly Guy Shefter. I mean, I can go on and on. However, we don't necessarily reach out to discover what traditions of Black feminism one can discover in countries like Brazil. And one of the first times I visited Brazil, I was actually very disturbed because I was being asked to represent a Black feminism that I knew was not nearly as advanced as some of the Black feminisms in Brazil. And so I had the opportunity many years ago to meet Leila Gonzalez. Leila Gonzalez was talking about intersectionality long before the word, the concept was introduced in this country. Marielle Franco, who, of course, was assassinated in, I think it was 2018, showed us a Black feminist praxis that allowed us to understand, why it is so important to challenge the militarization of the police at a time when we benefited from that kind of analysis of the role of police violence. And so, again, this is a question that we could spend hours exploring. But let me point out that we live in a global world. And as people who have grown up in the US, it is our responsibility to try to challenge the notion of American exceptionalism, to try to challenge the assumption that because we live in the US, we have the best possible resources, the best possible theories, the best possible strategies. That just is not the case at all. And so I want to encourage Black Americans who visit other countries inhabited by Black people. And of course, Brazil has the largest Black population in this hemisphere, to be humble and to try to learn about figures like Lelia Gonzalez and so many others, because the world is smaller, is getting smaller and smaller every day, and we have to join hands with our sisters, brothers, siblings, comrades in Mexico, in all over Central America, in South America. I had an amazing trip to Uruguay, which unfortunately I don't have the time to talk about, but I was impressed by the degree to which there was a mass consciousness of racism and its connection to misogyny and heteropatriarchy. So we can learn from people who are engaged in the very same struggles in other parts of the world.
Thank you again, Dr. Davis. We're nearly at the end of our evening here, but I'm hoping you can maybe if you can have one more question, if you can answer for us. This is actually my own question as well. You've been an influential movement leader for over 5 decades, and we applaud your commitment in all your work. During these 50 years plus in this country, we've seen many setbacks and many shortfalls in our efforts to address systemic injustices like racism and gender inequality, and to bring about meaningful progressive change in our country. My question to you is, are you still hopeful that meaningful change is possible? And if so, what gives you hope?
I have to be hopeful. We all have to be hopeful. And I want to refer to Mariam Kaba's notion of hope as a discipline. If we have no hope, there's no possibility for change. So an important dimension of our struggles is precisely to generate hope. And therefore, we look at struggles both inside the US, we look at the Palestinian people who have been struggling for the right to inhabit their own homeland for so many decades. And at the same time, even as hopeless as the predicament has appeared, they have generated the hope that not only will they be victorious, but that they will assist others throughout the world to engage in their freedom struggles. There can be no struggle for freedom if there is no hope. Again, I think I will conclude by pointing out that even as we engage in very specific kinds of campaigns to achieve very specific victories, such as for example, the end of gang injunctions, and the, as you pointed out earlier on, the end of the kind of expansion of jails and the school to prison pipeline. Even as we engage in these very specific struggles, we should recognize that we're actually trying to reconfigure the terrain of struggle. one of the, one of the most important aspects of the Black struggle, and we're talking about the struggles represented by Dr. Martin Luther King and others, for example, is that it is a struggle that is literally centuries old, century after century. During the period of slavery throughout the Americas, this quest for freedom has been passed down from one generation to the next. And that means that those of us who are involved in the organizing of those struggles today should be concerned with helping younger generations to find their path and to reconfigure the very terrain of struggle. We should not assume that freedom is a thing that we will be able to achieve if we do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we engage in that kind of mechanical approach, but rather it is an infinitely unfolding process where we learn more about the nature of freedom as we attempt to organize around demands for freedom. And so that is, in my opinion, how we generate that hope. And listening to Miriam dance and the beautiful song she presented us with in the beginning is an indication of how we communicate that that desire for collective freedom. Toni Morrison always pointed out that freedom is not individualistic. It's not for one person. It's about freedom for everyone. And the very nature of freedom requires us to attempt to expand it and to offer it to all of our siblings in the world.
Well, sí se puede. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. And just thank you for your insight and your inspiring words. Look forward to having you back in our community, but the next time we want to see you in person, if that's okay. Also want to thank our two Healing Justice community leaders, Crystal and Simone, and much thanks to all of you for joining us tonight remotely. Much thanks to Fielding University. And so with that, again, thank you, Dr. Davis. President Rogers, I understand you have some closing remarks.
Yes, I just want to thank you all as well. Thank you, Professor Davis, for being in conversation with us tonight. I think you have captivated our hearts and you've captured our imagination. And just amongst your words of wisdom, I think leaving us with the notion that hope is a discipline is so very important. And we should take that into our hearts and our minds as we think about our own work and how to apply it in our own work. Crystal and Simone, thank you so much, not only for your questions, but for bringing the voices of others in the room, and you as well, Marcus, much appreciated. And Miriam, Nancy, and John, beautiful music that also allows us to access a different part of our spirits. And to all those that made this possible, seen and unseen, and I welcome you again and thank you all for being here tonight. And for those of you in Santa Barbara, we also would like to invite you to the Melanin Gallery on State Street that is exhibiting works this month of Black artists. So I really want to invite you all, please support the arts and the work of Black artists. And with that in mind, I'm going to declare this event along with everyone else. I think you can see it's been a great success. Thank you again to our sponsors. I wish you all a peaceful weekend, and may we all honor and remember the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King on this upcoming Martin Luther King holiday. Thank you very much all, and I'll bid you all a good night.